Everybody ready? Everybody ready? Welcome to the genre show of legends. And of course, when heard legends, I started to think of sports legends. So I've collected information from each of you about your favorite sports legend. And we're going to start off with Dave. And Dave has got some other, you wanted to share a little bit about the your trip. You said before you started your story. Is that right? Dave? Oh, there you are. And you're muted.
You just tell me when you want me to go.
Okay, well, you've got
I am
somebody,
your humble servant.
you've got somebody in your background, but go ahead and start your story.
Yeah. Well, that's because Ed and I are on a wonderful trip up to up in the mountains. We're in Oakhurst, California. At that wonderful lady that you saw behind me. It's her home. We're staying in a little trailer here, and actually, other people are coming to watch us, so they might see a car, or like last night, you might see a couple of deer wander through. Don't be afeared. I know how to run, and so does Ed. She's used to it, so we're safe. But Ed and I have been having a wonderful day. We were lost up in the mountains today. Yeah, we're close to the gateway to Yosemite, and we went way up in the mountains. And you know, if you know Ed, you know he's a world traveler. He's been everywhere, done everything. And we were on a logging road, and he bottomed out on a snowbank on the road, so we had to turn around. But it was scary because we couldn't find a way to turn around. But Ed was channeling Marco Polo, and somehow he was able to turn us around and get us back to the main road. And thank God he wasn't channeling that Donner guy from years ago. But here we are, safe and sound, and seems like all the equipment's
That's not her.
working. So I'm ready to tell the story.
Well, first of all, I wanted to share your favorite sports uh, figure. You told me it was
Whatever you
Muhammad
like.
Ali.
That's right. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
All right, so I can go?
Yep, and your story is called Rosita's Secret.
That's right, Rosita's Secret. So my name indeed is Dave Tarvin, and I am a storyteller. And this story starts when I was just a boy. So actually, I was 13 years old, and I was living in Southern California in the San Fernando Valley. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just being a teenager or whatever. But all of a sudden, my parents said, "You are going to go stay with your grandfather for a while in Arvin, California." Now, most people have not heard of Auburn, California, because it's about this big. It's at the end of the San Joaquin Valley. It's a farming town, and my grandfather retired there. And so I go to my grandfather's. I get on a bus. I go over the mountain. I wind up in this little town. My grandfather picks me up at the bus station, takes me to his house, and then he took me to this little tiny shack. It said Rosita's Secret across the top. It was a chili shack, a little food shack. It was right on the edge of the town and on the edge of a vineyard. And so I go in there, and he's cooking this huge pot of chili. And he has me sit on this wooden stool, and he gives me this big wooden paddle, shoves it into that big pot of chili, and says, "Stir." And that's what I did. I just stirred and stirred and stirred. And then about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he opens this little window, and people show up, and he sells a bowl of chili and a plate of tortillas. And so the next 3 days, that's how it went. We get up, we drive over to Rosita's Secret. He starts the whole chili process and everything, but he did this very curious thing. About 3 o'clock, he would walk over to the wall, and there was this little tiny shelf, and on the shelf was this little stainless steel canister. It was very polished, and you could tell he took pride in that. He always kept it like highly polished, and he would open it, and there was a little spoon in there, and he would walk over to the pot while I was stirring it, and he'd take 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops into that pot of chili, and then he would go put it back on that little shelf. Well, day 4, my curiosity overtook me, and I said, Grandpa, what's the deal with the the canister, and spooning that stuff into the chili? What is that? What's that all about? He kind of looked at me for a minute. Now, Grandpa was kind of a grumpy old man. He didn't talk a whole lot. I didn't know him very well. He looks at me, he goes, Dave, that's Rosita's secret. I don't know what it was. It just sounded funny to me. So I busted up laughing. Oh, he got mad. He said, Dave, that's not funny. That's Rosita's secret. I said, okay, Grandpa, He said, well, in all fairness, I never told you about Rosita, have I? And I said, no. And he said, well, this is the story. So this is the story that he told me. He said, Dave, when I was a boy, not much older than you, living in Alabama, my parents sent me to go live with my grandfather during the summer too. He said, my grandfather, pretty old, and he lived in San Antonio, Texas. He lived in a teeny tiny apartment on the 2nd story of this old building, right on the edge of the downtown plaza in old San Antonio. Now that plaza was a military plaza, and military plazas are big. They're built for the military to come in the old days and do their drills and march and all that stuff. And he said, so there I was in my grandfather's apartment. And when I got there, there was very little money, very little food in the apartment because my grandfather was trying to get by on his old military pension. And he would spend his whole day just looking out the window, watching people in the plaza. And so I started doing that. And as I looked down there, I noticed that at night, during the day, the plaza had all these vendors, like people selling fire equipment, hay, seeds, whatever. But they would clear out in the afternoon. In the evening, food vendors would come in, selling tamales, chili, beer, whatever. And then these troubadours, musicians would come in. And they would set up these long tables and chairs and benches. And people would start to pour in from San Antonio, and they would go to the food vendors or the beer vendors, and they would sit and socialize with their friends. They would eat, and these troubadours would go around and people would pay them. Now, as I was sitting up there watching that, I thought, I brought my guitar. I bet if I went down there and played, somebody would pay me for, they would tip me. I could buy something to eat, maybe bring something back to Grandpa. So I went down and I started wandering through the plaza, and I was playing my guitar. And sure enough, somebody tipped me 1 thin dime. And that's all it took to get a bowl of chili. Now, at that particular time in history, San Antonio had 5 internationally famous chili queens. I mean, they were truly internationally famous. And they all, like all good cooks, they have secret ingredients, a secret in the chili. So when I had my dime, I asked people, I said, who makes the best chili? Where should I go buy the chili? I got a dime, I got a dime, I got a dime. And everybody said the same thing, Rosita, Rosita, Rosita. So I looked around, I found Rosita's stall, and I walked up to it. Long table, seating on the left, It's empty on the right. That's where you were supposed to walk up and order, you know. When I walked up there, she had her back to me. She had another table that was, you know, on the other side there where she had her pots and pans and the big bowl of chili and tortillas and all the utensils, the stuff that goes with cooking and serving. But she had her back to me and she was very tall and statuesque. And she had long, beautiful, thick, dark black hair that went right down to the bottom of her back. And she was wearing this white peasant blouse with embroidered flowers and such. And she was wearing a long black skirt. And I stood there just watching her. And then all of a sudden she turned around. She looked right at me and she said, "Can I help you?" And when I looked at her, I was just stunned. I looked into her eyes. She was just beautiful. She had skin like porcelain. And she had these deep, deep, dark eyes. And as I looked into them, I felt like I fell right into them. And that I sunk into the depths of that. And I was stunned. I'd never experienced that before. And I just stared at her. And so she said again, you know, what do you want? And I kind of snapped out of it. I said, "Oh, I'll have a bowl of chili, bowl of chili." She serves up a bowl of chili, plate of tortillas. I sit on the left. I eat my bowl of chili. And as I was eating, I conversed with Rosita. And we talked about this and that. And then I told her my little story about I'm staying with my grandpa. That's his place right up there. That window, he's there watching us. You know, there's not much money, there's not much food in the place. I finished my chili and my tortillas, and I told her, I said, "Rosita, you know, I come from a long line of cowboys and sod busters, and we all make chili. We all love it back home. I'd love to know the secret of your chili." And she just kind of looked at me and she said, "No." And I said, "Well, why?" And she leaned real in. She had like this little smirk. And she said, "It's a secret." I said, "Oh, okay." And then she said, "But I'll tell you what, if you can play my favorite song, I will tell you the secret to my chili." And so I sat there for a minute and I said, "Well, what's your favorite song?" And again, she had this little light in her eyes and this little smirk on her face. And she leaned forward and she said, "It's a secret." And I, in all my wondrous intellect, said, "Oh." And she said, so I just got up and I started playing a song. I thought I'll just take a stab at it. What do I got to lose? So I played and I played. And when I was done, I looked at her and she said, "You know, you play beautifully. You sing like an angel. But alas, that is not my favorite song. But I'll tell you what, you come back tomorrow and try again." And so the next day, I got up early. I wandered all through San Antonio and I asked people, "Do you know this Rosita woman? Do you know the secret to her chili? By the way, do you know her favorite song?" And everybody said the same thing, same thing, same thing. No. So I went back that night and I thought, I'll just try whatever I got, you know? So I stood in front of Rosita's stand and I played this song. And when I was done, she said, "Yeah, play beautifully. You sing like an angel. But alas, that is not my favorite song. But if you sit down, I'll give you a bowl of chili and a plate of tortillas for your efforts." So I did that, and she said, "Make sure you come back tomorrow." And so that's the way that it went for the next 7 days. I would show up, I would play a song. Rosita would say, "You play beautifully, you sing like an angel, but that's not my favorite song. Here's a bowl of chili. Come back tomorrow." But on the eighth day, I showed up and I said, "Rosita, this is my last day. I have to go on the train back to Alabama. So this is the last song I can play for you, and I truly hope that this is your favorite song." And so I started to play this old song that I'd heard somewhere. It was from down in old Mexico, and the title of the song was Maria of My Soul. And I started to play and I played, and now as I was playing, Rosita kept staring and staring, and then suddenly a little tear formed in her eye and started to come down her cheek. And she spoke and she said, "No, no, 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 that's good, that's good." She said, "That's my favorite song. Stop, stop, stop." So I stopped. She gave me the bowl of chili, plate of tortillas, and um, I ate and we talked. And then I was all done, and I said, "Rosita, what's the secret? What's the secret to the chili?" She leaned towards me and she kind of, in a low voice, she said, "My secret is 3 tablespoons of fine, dark ground coffee 1 hour before it finishes cooking." I said, "Wow, that's interesting." And so then she turned around and she reached behind her. She grabbed this piece of paper and she turned around. And she said, "This is my recipe, including the secret, and it's for you." And she reached out like this to hand me that recipe that she had written on the paper, and I reached up to grab it, and I just barely touched it, and she snapped it back. And she said, "But before I give it to you, I want to tell you 3 things that I always want you to remember." She said, "One, always be good to your family and those you love." She said, "Two, always, always, always work hard and do a good job." And she said, "But most importantly, 3, always, always remember that it is the little things in life that make the biggest difference."
Thank you, Dave. Boy, you got me hungry. I'm taking notes, and I'm going to see how that works the next time I make chili.
All right, well, call me. I'll come over. I'll bring the tortillas.
Okay. Well, let's see. Our next speaker is Shilpa. And am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I appreciate your dealing with the time problems and the messed up on the link. So we're finally got you. I'm so happy to hear from you. And I want to look at let's see what you told me about your favorite sports legend is an Indian cricketer called Virat Kohli. Did I say that right?
Yes. Virat Kohli. Yes.
That's great. That's great. I'm glad we had somebody who was not as predictable. I was going to say Billie Jean King or Brandy Chastain, but I like this one. This is somebody I would have never thought of. And it's a story called Lord Brahman's Folly. Go ahead. Let's see.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. Good morning, good evening to everyone who has joined from across the globe today. I am Shilpa Mehta, better known as Shilpa Story Rack in the storytelling fraternity. I am a storyteller based in Jaipur, which is in India. And before I dive into my story, I would like to brief you about Trimurti. In India, the term Trimurti refers to three gods, Lord Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and collectively they are called Trinity. Together, they represent the oneness of the universe while retaining their distinctive nature. They are all known for their ability to grant boons to people. Hymns are chanted in temples and homes, and there are countless stories about them. And today I'm going to tell you a legend from Hindu mythology about Lord Brahma's folly. Now, Lord Brahma is considered the creator of the universe and everything, both living and non living. He is said to have emerged from a lotus that emerged from Lord Vishnu's belly button. Just as an artisan molds statues, Brahma is the eternal sculpture responsible for the intricacies of all the life forms, and we all are considered his children. So, ages ago, the Lord of Love, Kamadeva, and his wife Rati prayed fervently to Lord Brahma for a boon. They wanted a special bow and arrow. So they fasted and they meditated for days and weeks and months, and finally Brahma appeared. Kamadeva said, "Dear Lord, give me a bow and arrow that will make anyone I shoot it with instantly fall in love with the nearest person." Now, Brahma considered the request and he thought, the boon is perfect. It will encourage more humans to fall in love, and over time, the number of children on this planet will increase and the human race will flourish. And I don't think strong willed people or those who follow any spiritual path will fall prey to Kamdev's arrow. So that should not stop me from granting the boon. And Lord Brahma raised his right hand and said, "So be it." And immediately a bow of sugarcane and an arrow of flowers appeared in front of Kamdev. He was delighted to see it. He took it and thanked God with all his heart before going on his way. Now Kamdeva wanted to test the bow, and without thinking too much, he shot the first arrow. First arrow at Brahma himself. At that time, Brahma was in the process of creating a beautiful maiden. And she was named Shatrupa, means a woman with 100 beautiful forms. Her beauty was nothing like the world had ever seen. And as soon as Brahma had finished breathing life into her, the magic of Kamdev's arrow started to take effect. The Lord began gazing at Shatrupa so intensely that it scared her. She had not expected her creator to behave in such a manner, so she stepped away from him, turning to his right. And Brahma could not look away. His eyes followed her. And to her surprise, a second head sprang up on his right. Shatrupa got alarmed and ran the other way, to his left. But a third head appeared in that direction as well. Finally, Shatrupa was right behind Brahma. And lo and behold, another head was formed. Now, Brahma had four heads facing all the directions, north, south, east, west. And this way, he was able to see Shatrupa no matter where she went. Now, the maiden had no choice but to turn upwards. And unfortunately for her, that didn't stop Brahma. Another head facing the sky sprang up on his first head. And thus Brahma's gaze stayed on Shatrupa. Now, Lord Shiva, who had been watching the entire incident, got furious. And he thought, it's time for me to step in and help the poor girl. Brahma is Shatrupa's creator. It is not right for him to fall in love with her like this. So what did Lord Shiva do? He cut off Brahma's sky-facing head in one swoop with his Trishul, a trident. And he cast a curse on him. From now on, you will eternally be a four-headed god, and you will be worshipped just in one place. Yes, just in one place. But After he had removed Brahma's fifth head, Lord Shiva realized that Brahma hadn't been completely responsible for his behavior. It was Kamadeva's arrow of love that all started. But now the curse can't be taken back. So, to soften the curse, Shiva declared, Brahma, even though you may not be worshipped the way Vishnu and I are worshipped, you will always be revered as a part of the divine trinity. And Shiva also felt that he had sinned by punishing Brahma. So, therefore, he became a wandering ascetic and made his way to Brahma Kapila. Now, Brahma Kapila is a place which is now known as Badrinath in India. It is a holy place. Shiva carried Brahma's severed head in his hands and used it as a begging bowl. But strangely, the skull would never fill up. No matter how much food went into it, the bowl remained empty. It was only when Shiva made his way to Varanasi, which is another holy city in India, and received alms from Annapurna, who is considered as the goddess of nourishment, that the begging bowl was finally full and it started to begin filling up. Brahma's fifth head is believed to have remained with Lord Shiva ever since. And this was Brahma's folly, which made him a four-headed god. We have no other god who has four heads, and I don't know you have ever seen such a god. And this incident about which I am talking, considered to be happened in Pushkar, which is a place in Rajasthan and which is hardly a 3 hours drive from Jaipur, where I live. And I have been to that place, I have been to that temple, I have seen Lord Brahma's statue there, and it is wonderful, yes. And you can find the temples of various other gods like Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu at various places, but Lord Brahma's temple is only at one place, and that place is Pushkar. So that is due to Lord Shiva's curse. And now you must be wondering how Lord Brahma looked. So I will request Prakriti to give you a glimpse of what Lord Brahma looks like. Yes, here it is. So can you see four heads? Only the three heads are visible, but if you can see the crown, yes, it is right behind his head. So these are the four heads. So this is four-headed Lord Brahma in Hindu mythology, who is considered the creator of the universe. And now, Prakriti, I would request you to show the picture of Trinity, the three gods who are considered as Trinity in Hindu mythology. So here you have Lord Brahma. In the center, you have Lord Vishnu, from whose belly button Lord Brahma emerged. And on my extreme right, with the trident, is Lord Shiva, who had cut Lord Brahma's head with this trident, which he is holding in his hand. So this is considered as Trinity, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Brahma. Thank you so much. So that was Lord Brahma's folly.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And it was kind of a travelogue as well, because we got to go to these places along with where the gods were or had statues. And really amazing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Yeah, somebody else says she loved Vicky says she loves the travel part too.
Yes. So next time, whenever you come to India, then obviously I think Jaipur, which is known as Pink City, for its which is famous for its cultural heritage, food, and of course shopping. Do plan a drive to Pushkar, and you will always remember my story.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, next we have Linda. Linda Yamamoto, are you here?
Yeah,
Yes.
oh, there
Oh,
I
there
am.
you are. Okay. Well, Linda is telling a story, Winning Without Hands, about a legendary Japanese samurai. And let me look and see. Tiger Woods is your favorite sports legend. He was the first black Asian athlete to break through the racism still prevalent in golfing. I hear that. Um, I'll let Linda just jump into the story now because she's such a popular teller, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Claire. For 800 years, the samurai were the warrior class of Japan. Their reverence for honor, duty, and service remains ingrained in the Japanese culture to this day. The word samurai comes from saburao, which means to serve. Samurai means one who serves. But the samurai did not serve a king. They served their warlord, their daimyo, and in turn the daimyo would take care of the samurai and his family. There were hundreds of daimyo, and each daimyo might have 100 to 200 samurai to them. All the daimyo pledged their allegiance to the shogun. He was the highest ranking military official. And then above the shogun was the emperor, although sometimes just a figurehead, because often the shogun had more power than the emperor. Now, Sukahara Bokuden was probably the most famous, the most legendary, the most deadly samurai of his day. He was born in 1491 and lived to an amazing 83 years old. He had fought in 32 battles for his daimyo and 19 individual duels, never having lost once. Now, one spring, he decided he wanted to attend a religious festival, which was quite a ways from his home. He had to travel down to Lake Biwa, which is a large lake in the middle of Japan, and then he had to cross Lake Biwa. Now, in order to cross Lake Biwa, he had to get on a ferry. And in those days, this is what a ferry would look like. Just kind of a curved bottom boat. And there might be one or two men with long poles to propel the boat. And people would either stand or sit on the boat. Looks kind of precarious, I would think. So Bokuden traveled down to Lake Biwa, came to the ferry dock, got onto the ferry, and made his way to the front, to the bow of the boat. And then he watched as the boat began to fill with farmers and tradesmen and craftsmen and politicians, all kinds of people wanting to go to this religious festival. Well, even though his name might have been quite well known, his face was not, as there was no newspaper, magazines, internet. So they knew he was a samurai because he was carrying two swords, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi. And the samurai were the only ones allowed to carry two swords in public. But nobody really knew who he was. Well, the boat became quite full, and the boatman was ready to push off from the dock when a young burly samurai came striding down the road. Mate! Wait! So he jumped onto the boat and pushed his way to the front, to the bow. All right, now you may go. So the boatman pushed the boat away from the dock into the lake. Well, it was quite windy that day, and the wind caused the boat to kind of rock back and forth, and this caused an old farmer to slip, and his muddy zori, his sandal, touched the saya, the covering of the katana, the young samurai's sword. You bakadare! You moron! How dare you touch the saya of a samurai's sword? Yurushite, yurushite kudasai. Oh, forgive me, sama, samurai-sama. I am just a poor old farmer, and I meant no disrespect. It was the movement of the boat that caused me to lose my balance." "Lose your balance, did you? Let's see how well you can balance on one foot only." He was about to bring down his sword on the farmer's foot when he looked behind him, and Bokudan had grabbed onto his sleeve and was holding it tightly. "Old man, this is none of your business." "Young samurai, put away your blade. Do not do something today that a true samurai would regret tomorrow." "You are teaching me how to be a true samurai? Do you not know that I am a master of the Tatsumi Ryu, the school of the invincible, those who cannot be defeated? I challenge you." "I am but a humble student of the Mutekatsu Ryu, the school of winning without hands. I admire your confidence, but this is no place for us to show our swordsmanship. Boatman, take us out to that island." And there was a small island in the lake, really just a sandbar with a few reeds coming up. So the boatman poled them over to the sandbar. The young samurai was so anxious to prove himself that he jumped off the boat and began splashing through the water to the sandbar, and then he pulled out his sword. That is when Bokunin took the pole from the boatman and shoved the boat further out into the lake. "What are you doing? Come back here! Fight me like a true samurai!" "Thank you, but no. These good people and I have a religious festival to attend." And with that, he gave the pole back to the boatman, who took them across Lake Biwa. "Domo, domo arigato, samurai-sama. Thank you so much for saving my life. May I please ask your name?" "Hajimemashite. Nice to meet you. Watashi wa, my name is Bokuden Tsukahara desu." Well, everyone on the boat gasped, for they did not recognize his face, but they recognized his name. And they knew that if Bokuden had drawn his sword on that young samurai would be lying dead on that sandbar in the middle of Lake Biwa. Now, this story has been told over and over and over again for over 500 years, for it demonstrates one of the samurai's most important lessons. One's greatest victories can come when one never has to draw their sword. Oshimai. That is all. Thanks.
Wow, that was wonderful, and it struck me as it's so universal. I mean, it's a very nice that it's in Japan, but this lesson is for all kinds of cultures, and in the current political times.
Yeah, pretty universal message, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, let's see. We have Linda and now we have Alicia. Alicia, how do you pronounce your last name? Retz? Oh, unmute.
My name is Alicia Rettis.
Rettis. Okay. Alicia, let's see. I didn't write down your favorite sports hero. You're going to tell us another word that I can't pronounce. Gurukam. An Australian Aboriginal legend. and it's supposed to be hilarious, and we get some music with it, so it'll be great. Thank
Well,
you. Thank
given that I'm going to be playing the didgeridoo, I would say the legendary person that I admire is Frank Sinatra, because he sang and he knew how to do the circular breathing, which is required when you play the didgeridoo. So there's my answer to a hero. I am Alicia Retes, and I reside in the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok people. In 1988, I was hired to do a tour of my mixed media work in Australia, and that's where I met the Jebagai tribe in Coranda, and they taught me how to play the didgeridoo. And fortunately, I was in northern territory of Australia where women are permitted to play the didge. This is the didgeridoo, and it's made by a man called Weerajuri, and I'll play this for you. Get enough room. It likes to drink water. And the story is Gurukman, the giant frog. A long time ago, way back in the dream time, 65,000 years ago, there lived many mythical beings, and in particular, there lived a giant frog. His name was Gurukman. This frog was very, very large, and he didn't live in a creek or a lake or a river. They were too small for him. And when he hopped on the land, the earth shook. And he didn't mind that he didn't fit it into any body of water because he liked to hop on dry land. One very hot day, the animals were gathered over by a water hole, and they were chatting about the day while the little ones were playing in the water, when they felt the earth move. Gurukman was coming to their water hole, and he sat at the edge of the water hole, and the parents scrambled to get their little children out of the water because Gurukman began to drink, and he drank and he drank and he drank. He drank up all the water in the water hole, and all that was left was a muddy patch. But he was still thirsty. So he hopped away, and he went to a river. He drank, and he drank, and he slurped up all the water in the river. Well, he was particularly thirsty on this day, so he went to the ocean, and he drank the entire ocean. His belly, big and green, grew bigger and bigger, and yet he was still thirsty. He went from waterhole to waterhole, rivers and lakes, and he drank up all the water in the land. And once he was full, he hopped very slowly with the water gurgling and rushing in his belly to the top of a mountain. And there he sat, looking over the dry land, very content. He was finally thirsty. Now, the animals were quite worried. The Gorukman was drinking up all the water. There would be no water for the trees or the grass to grow. But Emu and Goanna, the lizard, were pretty good friends. And Emu went to Goanna and said, "Oh, it appears that Gorukman has drinking all the water in the land. What are we to do about this? Without water, we would die." And Goanna was listening very carefully and said, "Well, we should seek the wisdom from Wombat the Wise. He'll know what to do." So they went to Wombat, and Wombat had gathered up all of the animals to have a meeting to discuss what was to be done. Well, Kookaburra, lovely little Kookaburra, he was the first to fly up to Gurukwan to simply ask him to release some of the water, to share the water. Little Kookaburra flew up to Gurukman and said, "Gurukman, you don't need all the water. Why don't you share with the rest of us?" But that big green frog, he refused. Kookaburra went down to meet with the rest of the animals, and it was Possum's turn to speak. And Possum said, oh God, I'm so afraid, I'm so afraid, what are we to do? Wait, what if we were to frighten Gurukman? Yeah, if we were to frighten him, then he'd have to cough up all the water, but what could possibly frighten a ginormous frog? Oh, I don't know. Goanna spoke next, saying, well, what if we were to make Gurukman sneeze? If he were to sneeze, all the water would come gushing out. Ooh, but are frogs ticklish? Especially a giant frog. Wombat had been listening and thought, they're onto something. And Wombat said, well, no, just as a good idea. I think maybe, what if we were to make him laugh? Huh? If we were to make him laugh, he would spill out all the water. Well, now the animals thought that this was a pretty good idea, and they didn't know what else to do. And once again, Kookaburra was the first to fly up to Gurukman, thinking he would tell his funniest jokes. All the Kookaburras laugh at his jokes. So he flew up and said, Gurukman, did you hear the one about kukukura? Oh, everybody laughed, except for Gurukman. Sat there with his big green belly. Next was Emu. Emu came out, saying, well, I shall do my funny dance. Yes, my funny dance with my three-toed legs. And he began to dance, and his neck was waving like a snake, and his eyes rolling up in his head. Some of the animals had tears coming down their face. They thought it was the funniest thing. And the Gurukman? Nope. Next was Kangaroo. Kangaroo came up and said, I know. I'll do my funny hops. So he hopped to the left. He hopped to the right. He did little hops and big hops. He did a back flip hop. And just as he was about to do the biggest hop ever, his foot got stuck in a hole and he fell flat on his face. Oh, the animals were laughing. He looked pretty ridiculous with all that dust flying around and his legs up. But Gurukman? The animals were pretty worried about this. What are they to do? And they began to think, well, maybe frogs don't laugh. And then they heard an old voice. Oh, yes, they do. I ought to know. I am Numbunum, and I've heard frogs sing whenever it rains. Numbunum the eel wiggled up. Now, right up to the meeting, the magpie saw him, and he looked so weird and strange on land. They started to giggle and point, and Numbunum said, "What are you laughing at? You wouldn't be laughing if your trees were gone, now would you? Now, listen to me. I know how to make him laugh. Frogs do laugh. And I'll show you." So, Numbunum the eel began to wither and twist and turn and curl and uncurl, and he tied in among himself, and he got stuck. And then they heard a gurgle. And Gurukman had a bit of water coming out. And the more that Numbunum struggled to untie himself, Gurukman started to laugh. And the water came gushing out. And it went back to the billabongs and the lagoons and the water holes in the rivers, filling up the ocean once again. Well, poor Numbunum, he stood there saying, "I see, I told you I could make him laugh. Now untie me." The animals quickly untied him and thanked him. Numbunum saved everyone, all the animals, and all of the plants. Oh, and Gurukman? He shrank with each hop. He was so embarrassed that he was so greedy and not sharing. He hopped away, and as he hopped, he got smaller and smaller. And today, his ancestors are only 4 inches long. Story done.
Wow. I am so impressed, Alicia, or all the characters. Everybody, you did these animals and they were so vivid. You
Oh,
know,
good.
as to the snake and the little hissing and the, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun to do. And so thank you very much for letting me do it for all of you. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's see. Where are we now? We've got one more teller, and it is Vicky Ness. And Vicky is going to tell a story about the gift. And her favorite sports legend is Stephen Curry. Me
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I like him. Yay. And
Yeah.
she's going to bring up any gigs afterwards. Oh, you have a workshop, right?
Yeah, but you know, if everybody could just do, I'm sure everybody has things going on, so
Okay, well, I'll do
I'd like
that.
to add
Yeah.
into it. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to tell you a story about a legend so much as what it takes to become a legend. Alma Tidy Bones. There was a nothing old lady, really. She was forgettable. She had her opinions. She had her illnesses, which she didn't hesitate to tell you about. But the things you rarely heard were the things that she believed very deeply inside. One of those things was that every human born on this earth has a gift to give the world. And it is their privilege and their right and their joy, and yes, their responsibility to give that gift. Now, Alma Tidybone's gift was 35 acres of wild, wild woods right in the middle of town. Now, the town she lived in was as forgettable as she was. It was so forgettable that people couldn't help but raise their shoulders in a shrug every time they said the name of the town. You see, she lived in, anywho, California. Anywho, had a grand total of about 12 houses, convenience store straddling a scrawny little country road that went from somewhere over there to who knows where over there, nothing little town. And right smack in the middle of it was paradise, as Alma Tidy Bones would tell you, because you see, all around that little scrawny town was agriculture with beautiful, neat rows. Oh, vineyards and rows of crops rising up over hills like so many folds of corduroy, up, over, down into valleys, as far as you could see, neat, orderly rows of crops, except for the wild, wild woods, which was paradise to Alma. So she hand wrote a will and she sent it to the city council, hoping that they would approve it and then send it on to the state so it could become a state park. Well, the city council consisted of 3 extremely lazy people and 1 rather avaricious person, and that would be Elias Grubb. Elias Grubb was in the employment of a global development corporation that stretched its long, thin, greedy, sucking little fingers around the globe, picking up innocent properties, turning them into profit. And when they saw that there was 35 acres of perfectly good land going for no use whatsoever that would make a perfectly good industrial park in that podunk town of California, why, they set Elias Grubb to go get it. And he knew he could do it because he knew how to handle old women. You write them a letter, there's nothing they like better than getting something in the mail, you know. So he wrote her a letter and offered her $10,000 for the whole thing. And she wrote him a very nice letter back and said, "Why, Mr. Grubb, thank you so much, but no." Poor old thing, she's gotten daffy. So he showed up at her door with shopping bags full of $1 bills, 10,000 of them, and he rattled them in her face when she opened the door and said, "You'll be rich, Tidy Bones." And she said, "Why, Mr. Grubb, I think I told you no." And she closed the door. Time to get out the big guns. So he called up the corporate lawyers who showed up on her doorstep and did their evil little weasel dance with their little fangs shining and their eyes glittering. And they pointed with their terrible little weasel paws to one line. All she had to do was sign that line and they'd go away. And she slammed the door in their little weasel faces. Well, now there was not much for Elias Grubb to do, but that was okay. He could sit back and wait for her to die. You see, she wasn't just old, she was actually elderly. And she had no heirs. He knew this. And if the only will that she had was a handwritten one that she sent to him, which he promptly trashed, why, without a will, that property would go into probate. And he could pick it up for a song. All he had to do was sit back and will her to die. Well, she was elderly. And she did die, but not before going outside and asphyxiating herself to the side of the house like a barnacle to the hull of a ship. And there she stayed. Well, the coroner came out and declared her well and fully dead, but they couldn't get her body off of the side of the house. They tried crowbars, they tried heat lamps, they tried all manner of things. Nope, she was not moving. Well, the Grim Reaper even came by in his long, dark boat of sighs, navigating that roiling river of death. And he called to her, "Alma, it's time for your journey to continue." And she very politely said, "Oh no, Mr. Death, I don't think so." Mother Nature roiled herself up. And she spoke rather directly. Alma, listen to me, honey. That body of yours was a loaner. I loaned it to you when you were born. And when you're finished, you need to bring it back. And Alma Tidy Bones, you are finished. Bring me that body back. And Alma simply said, nope, not going to do it. Well, there's not much you can do. You can't sell the property with the body still clinging to the side of it like that. So it sat there, it didn't even go into probate. The only thing that changed in anywho was that the people started talking. Did you see what Alma did? Did you see what that tidy bones woman did? She stood up to that grub man, that corporate person there, and she said no to him. Why? Oh, isn't that amazing? Well, the stories grew more florid and more fantastical. And then they did what stories always do if they're really good. They sink into the very ground we walk on. And they travel underground and they show up in this county or that city or that country. You see the story of the little old American woman who stood up to corporate greed and prevailed, appealed to everybody all around the world. Why, from Iceland to Ireland, from South Africa to Siberia, people love to hear the story of that little old nobody lady who stood up to corporate greed. And Alma's spirit was delighted. She went all around the world visiting with these people as her story was told. Oh, it was amazing. But more importantly, oh my, she found herself included in the sisterhood of legendary old hags, those old women who stood the test of time. So, for example, she sipped a bitter, dark brew in the boneyard gardens of Baba Yaga in Russia. Oh my. But then she went up to the Northlands to watch Ilya. Oh, that withered old crone who could nevertheless wrestle the great god Thor to the ground. Oh my. And then down to the southern tip of Australia, where the great old Mother Wallu gave birth to every day, celebrating it with streaks of ochre and sienna. A beautiful celebration of every day. It was a wonderment. And then up to the North Atlantic, oh my, on a craggy rock, she stood calling in all the winter rain and wind and howling, screaming winds of winter. As the ocean pushed and pulled beneath her, she called in all of winter's ferocity with the Cailleach of Scotland. Well, it was quite an honor to be one of these women, but she kind of missed home. So she took her leave and went back to anywho, California. But it was no longer anywho. It was anywho, because you see, her body had become a social media sensation, and people came from all around the world to take selfies with her body in the background there and to see how many likes they got and how many clicks they got. And so when Alma came back to town, her spirit wafting through the town, there was the Tidy Bones gift shop and the Tidy Bones bookstore. And there in front of her house was a plaque, "Welcome to the Alma Tidy Bones State Park." Somebody had gone in and found her will, handwritten, in her desk. And it had gone to the state and they had made it a park, much to the demise of the dreams of a certain Elias Grubb. She had won. But as she wandered around, thin as a whiff of smoke, why, everybody was having such a good time, but they were centered around her body and they couldn't get their faces out of their devices. And she said, yeah, no, paradise is around you. Get your face out of your phone, look around you, there's paradise. But no, they were very busy. Well, there wasn't much for her to do but to release her soul. And so when the Grim Reaper came by, as he did every night, guiding his long, silent ship, muttering this time to himself about that goddamn Alma Tidybones, a stubborn ass woman, get her off of that. And here she came, her soul skipping like a school child, jumping into the boat and sitting at the prow and saying, "Mr. Death, where shall we go next?" Oh, well, he pushed off, and down the dark river of death he went with the soul of Alma Tidybones before the spirit of Alma Tidybones could catch up with him. Well, with no soul, her body released its grip on this world and fell into a fetid pile of old old rags and rotted flesh and bones, and Mother Nature gobbled that up in a single gulp and issued a not very ladylike and said to nobody in particular, "Well, thank you," and went on about her business. Well, with nothing to look at or take pictures of, what people began to look around themselves and they began to see. And so to this day, if you happen to go to California and you happen to go to California, and you happen to make it to the Alma-Tidy Bones State Park, you will find people wandering, looking in 35 acres of wild, wild woods for a sighting of a deer or a fox, listening to the sound of a raptor or a songbird, touching a seasonal spring for its icy cold, and smelling the warm scent of sun-baked pine needles and leaf mulch. And then they would return, and the ranger would have everybody come, and he would tell again the legend of Alma-Tidy Bones, the little nobody woman, just like everybody that you see, a nobody, but she prevailed against evil. Not with the violence of warriors, not with the sticky-fingered greed of the rich and powerful. She prevailed because she had belief. She had a faith in something that was more valuable than herself, that she had a gift to give, and she intended to give it. And so she looked death and Mother Nature and a particularly odious Elias grub right in the face and said, "No, I don't think so." Thus, saying yes to paradise for generations to come.
Wow. That was delightful. That was delightful. I'm starting to kind of relate to her like these old crones. I want to join this society of old crones.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you had something to share with us about your workshop?
Just yes. I offer a workshop. It's online, 2 hours, and it's the last Saturday in June, which would be the 28th. And it's a series of exercises for creating your own fantasy stories. And it's 2 hours, and it's a lot of fun. And if you're interested, send me your chat, and I will send me a chat with your email, and I'll send you information.
Great. All right. Thank you. Now, does anybody else have some gigs or workshops to promote? Linda?
Yeah, I put in the chat the Bay Area Storytelling Festival, which is a SAC event, of course, coming up in June. We're up in Santa Rosa again at the really absolutely beautiful site of the Sonoma Academy. And the lineup this year is just incredible with, Dovey Thomason and Willie Claflin premiering their new 80-minute piece called A Space Oddity. Brandon Leake, who is an incredible spoken word artist. Let's see, Charlotte Blake Alston. And then we'll have a youth concert as well, and a regional showcase of 6 storytellers from SAC. So please come join us. And if you can't come there to be in person, we do have virtual options too. So I put the link in how to get all the information in the chat. Please come.
Great. Who else? Alicia, did you have some?
I do. I'm telling stories at the Portrayal Library next Saturday. Wednesday, I go to the White Hills School, and so I'm telling stories throughout the Greater Bay Area, mostly at libraries and a couple of schools. But I also have my artwork now in, I did 3 exhibits. I'm pretty excited about bringing my art out. And this is one of them. And inside it are these little spirit dolls that I make.
Oh.
And so they tell a story within the box, and I have some acrylics at the Tiburon Town Hall exhibit called We Know Who We Are. It's all indigenous artists. And I've got a watercolor called Pacific Roots that's in the San Geronimo Community Center here. So I'm pretty excited to be bringing out my mixed media art in addition to storytelling. So I'm thrilled.
You're a Renaissance woman.
Yeah, my mother was a Renaissance woman. What can I tell you? It runs in the family.